Chapter 4, The Queen Who Bet on All or Nothing. Excuse me, Majesty, I don't think I understood correctly, did you say? Asked Lord Alfred, bewildered and unable to believe what he thought he had heard. Lord Alfred, you have heard well, that I intend to marry Lord Melbourne on his convalescent bed and in a hurry, for the risk that still runs his life, Victoria answered calmly and firmly, without hesitation. Lord Alfred's mouth dropped open in surprise. The Duchess of Sutherland was as disconcerted as Lord Alfred, and Emma Portman was, in addition to being surprised, deeply touched, and began to mourn for her great friends, Victoria and especially Lord Melbourne. Scarlett looked like a frightened animal, very nervous, and seemed to want to hide in a corner, behind the curtain. She did not understand very well because the Queen had made her present in such a delicate situation, that she was a simple maiden of Her Majesty. But surely the most affected was Laizen. The Baroness turned pale as if she had been given a tragic news, and for a moment she seemed to lose her balance, and Scarlett moved to help her if necessary, and Victoria herself worriedly reached out her hand slightly to take it. But Laizen raised her hand with her palm out in a gesture to say that she did not need help. Majesty, if you allow me in your presence, I need to sit down, Laizen said, trying to sound cold, but betrayed by her trembling voice. Of course Laizen, if you feel bad you can leave and I'll talk you later, Victoria said with sincere concern. No, it is not necessary Majesty, I'm fine, Laizen said, sitting down. Still seeing Laizen, Victoria remembered what she wanted to say to all, turned to see Lord Alfred and decided to resume the thread of the conversation. As I was saying, my will is I marry Lord Melbourne in his bed, to the danger that... Victoria's face darkened, and now it was her that broke her voice a little, he could die. I understand that in such cases, when a couple wishes to marry and one of the future spouses is in danger of death, the law grants facilities for the marriage to be formalized. It is my wish to marry Lord M as soon as possible, in anticipation of any eventuality. But Majesty, that is in the case of common people, ordinary people. You are the Queen, replied Lord Alfred, trying to sound respectful and comprehensive. I'm quite aware of it, my dear Lord Alfred, Victoria said with a smile between amused and ironic. Then you must know that your marriage is a matter of state, of the highest importance, that you should consult with the Privy Council, and that Parliament should discuss important details such as the assignment of her future husband. You cannot. Lord Alfred explained. I understand, Lord Alfred, perfectly. But that is in case the Queen's fiancé is in good health and can wait patiently for all the necessary legal steps. In this case, my future husband may not be able to wait, and above all I don't want to wait. I want to marry Lord Melbourne, if, I hope it does not happen, God decides to call him to his presence. Victoria said, unable to avoid showing emotion in her voice and her face. I want him to be my husband already, and in that case I want to be his widow in the eyes of God. And if he lives, as is my dearest hope, I want him to do it as the worthy husband of the Queen to whom he saved her life and who loves him with all her heart, Victoria added, looking her eyes in the eyes of Emma, who cried with more strength and ended up covering her face with a handkerchief. I understand, Your Majesty, but I am not sure that a marriage under such conditions could be celebrated, and if it could be celebrated, I think it would cause a serious state problem, a constitutional crisis. Your Majesty, they may demand your abdication, your resignation to the crown, your stay on the throne would be in serious danger, and the country could rush to the abyss of division and instability. It is my duty to warn you, Your Majesty, said Lord Alfred with concern. My dear friends, I am aware of the risks involved in my decision. I understand the responsibility on my shoulders, the responsibility with our country and the British people, but I have come to the conclusion that to be a better Queen I must take risks and follow this course of action. What I propose is a marriage in secret, if the worst happens and Victoria refused to verbalize her fear of a possible death of Lord Melbourne. Lord M. Wood will no longer with us, my status as a widow would not transcend the public opinion, and only a few people would know about this marriage. If, Lord M survives his current mishap, I have a plan to deal with this situation and convince the kingdom institutions to accept Lord Melbourne as my consort, reserving my marriage held in his bed like an ace under my sleeve, a measure of pressure. It's risky, I know, but I take responsibility. Victoria watched the faces of the people in her inner circle, saw in them mixed feelings, but in none of them did she see a hint of optimism or enthusiasm. I know that what I am asking you for is too much, that I am asking you to help me with something that you would undoubtedly consider it crazy, and which can have unpredictable consequences. So if you do not want to participate in this, I will understand. You should not feel obligated, but I would be grateful if you trusted me, and for affection to me you would help me in this enterprise. I would like to have your faith, just as I'm sure I have your affection, Victoria said, looking their faces over. Does William agree with your idea, Your Majesty? Emma asked with tenderness and anxiety, one of the few people who called Lord Melbourne by his Christian name. He agrees, my dear Emma. I made sure of his support before proposing to you this plan, said Victoria, who saw the surprise reflected in everyone, especially Lord Alfred and Emma, that of those present were those who knew him best. Has Lord Melbourne consented, Majesty? Lord Alfred asked in amazement, knowing Lord Melbourne's deep-rooted sense of duty, and his common sense little inclined to crazy adventures. Does not my dear Lord Alfred believe me? Victoria asked quietly and with a smile. No, Majesty. Of course I don't question your words. It's just that Lord Melbourne is, replied Lord Alfred confused. Reasonable? Yes, and he is, Lord Alfred, but I think I have an extraordinary power of conviction, so great that I can convince the most sensible man and with greater sense of responsibility of England to follow me on a crazy adventure with uncertain destiny, answered Victoria something funny, with a sweet and somewhat mocking gesture. Or perhaps it is the love that has made that man an incorrigible romantic, replied the Duchess of Sutherland with a smile and a gesture of cheerful complicity with her friend Victoria. It can be, too, my dear Harriet. Victoria replied with a beaming smile. Count on me, Your Majesty. Emma said, approaching Victoria and offering her hands. I did not expect less from you, Emma. Victoria answered, taking her friend's hands. And with me, Your Majesty, said the Duchess of Sutherland. Thanks, Harriet. Victoria thanked her. And of course, with me too. As far as Her Majesty can serve, Lord Alfred said. Thank you, Lord Alfred. The first thing I need is for you to get a cleric who is willing to celebrate marriage Lord Melbourne with me in such conditions, Victoria said with some anxiety. It will not be easy, Majesty, said Lord Alfred, but I think I have 2 or 3 candidates in mind. Bring to me whoever you think he who is most inclined to do, and I'll take care of it, and convince him, but it must be as soon as possible, Victoria said. Of course, Your Majesty, said Lord Alfred, with your permission, I can now go and get the man. Go away, Lord Alfred. Good luck, said Victoria. Lord Alfred left the room and Victoria saw Lazan still sitting quietly, addressed the rest of those present. My dear friends, thank you for your support. Now, please, leave me alone with Baroness Lazan, later I'll join you, she told Emma and the Duchess of Sutherland. They parted affectionately and proceeded to depart. Scarrat was also about to retire. Miss Scarrat, please wait, Victoria said, approaching her, you still have not told me your opinion. My opinion, Majesty. My duty is to obey you, Your Majesty, said Scarrat in surprise. True, but in this case I'm interested in having you on a voluntary basis. I value your voluntary commitment as much as any of those others who were present at this meeting. If you do not wish to be present on the spot because you think it is against your duty, I will understand, Victoria told her. For me, it will be an honor, Your Majesty. Thank you, Scarrat. Now please leave me with Baroness Lazan. Scarrat went out and closed the door slowly. Victoria pulled up a chair and sat down next to Laizen, and took her hand. "Tell me what you think, Laizen," Victoria said sympathetically. "Your Majesty." Laizen began. "Please, Laizen. I cannot have this conversation with you if you do not call me Dina, at least this time, call me Dina." "You have my permission," Victoria said fondly. "Dina, you're going to kill me of chagrin," replied Laizen, like a disgusted mother who rebukes a daughter who is going to do something very dangerous or inconvenient, that can put at risk the welfare of that daughter, something that really distresses to her mother. "Why?" Victoria asked sympathetically. "You ask me, Dina? You're going to endanger everything. Your crown, the destiny for which you were born, for what we have prepared for you all your life, the welfare of your nation, everything. And all for that man," answered Laizen. "Laizen, do you know that I love you as if you were my mother?" Victoria said, looking into her eyes and squeezing her hand. Laizen shuddered a little and her mask of coldness cracked, and her eyes became wet. "Dina." Laizen was going to speak, but drowned by emotion, she could not. "Why do you think I asked you to stay with me when I became queen? Why did I ask you not to return to your homeland and made you in charge of my palace and servants? Because I needed you by my side. Do you know that when I began to reign the only people who helped me were Lord M and you? Without you two I could not have done it, I would not have been able to face those who wanted to control me or take off my throne, that's why you two are the people I trust the most in the world. I love my mother, of course, but you know I cannot trust her. When it comes to needing a mother I can trust, I'm looking for you. Now, tell me Laizen, honestly, what do you think of Lord Melbourne?" said Victoria. "I think he is a noble man, sincere, honorable, a gentleman, and I think he protects you and wants your well-being," Laizen admitted. "And what more could a mother want for her daughter? You do not want my happiness, my dear Laizen," Victoria exclaimed excitedly. "But Dina, you two were not born to be together. If you were not the queen I would be delighted that you marry him, because I know he would take care of you and make you happy. But you were born for greatness, to be the queen of an empire, you cannot lose that for any man, not even for one as good as Lord Melbourne. Dina, there will be other men, you are very young," replied Laizen anxiously. "I do not want any other man, Laizen. It's him or none. I ask you to trust me, Laizen, have faith in me, if you think you did a good job educating me, if you love me like a daughter, I ask you to trust. I know what I do, and I will not disappoint you. I need you by my side, now more than ever," said Victoria almost pleading. Laizen paused for a moment, then dared to break the protocol, and brought a hand of Victoria to her lips and kissed the back of her little Dina's hand. "I trust you, my beloved Dina," Laizen answered, trying not to let a single tear fall. "Thank you my dear Laizen," replied Victoria cheerfully and kissed Laizen in the hand. After the emotional conversation with Laizen, alone in her office, Victoria remembered the conversation she had with Lord Melbourne before she gathered her friends, the conversation in which she convinced the reluctant Lord Melbourne to accept her plan. As on previous occasions, Victoria used the excuse of the affairs of state between the Queen and her Prime Minister to be alone with him in the bedroom. As soon as the nurse closed the door, Victoria sat on the bed and kissed Lord Melbourne on the lips. "Victory, please. One day they will see us," Lord Melbourne protested, though the smile he was trying to hide betrayed the pleasure he felt. "If they are surprised us, I say that you forced me. My Prime Minister stole a kiss me. Can you imagine the scandal in the house? Can you imagine what Mr. Peel would say about degenerate Lord Melbourne?" Victoria asked mockingly. They both laughed. "You're incorrigible, Victoria," said Lord Melbourne with laughter. "Have pity on me, it still hurts when I laugh," he added, and as if to confirm it he coughed something, and with his pale and emaciated face aroused concern. "How do you feel, Lord M?" Victoria asked worriedly. I'm feeling a little better, he said, sounding reassuring. Lord M. I already know your feelings for me, but I want to ask you something seriously. If I were not the queen, would you have married me? Victoria asked seriously and a little anxiously. Victoria, why torture me? Lord Melbourne complaining, closing his eyes and with a shadow of torment on his face. You were born to be queen and that cannot be changed. Please, Lord M. Answer to me. Victoria urged. If you were not the queen, I would have asked you to marry me. If you had been the daughter of a duke, a marquis, or a count, if you had been the daughter of a lawyer, a doctor, or a clergyman, if you had was a maid. You do not know how I reproached God that you had not been a maid. Lord Melbourne said sadly and sincerely. Maid? Would you have married me if I had been a simple maid? Victoria asked incredulously. If you had been a maid, I would have been the happiest man in the world. I would have proposed marriage to you and I would have made you my wife, if you would have wanted it too, of course, Lord Melbourne answered with a sad smile. And your reputation? Your social position? Victoria asked. Victoria, I do not give a damn about my reputation, anyway my reputation never recovered completely from my wife's scandal. And frankly, I do not mind anything that they speak ill of me. If I had fallen in love with a woman of inferior social status I would not have cared to marry her. What would I have had to lose? My political career matters little to these heights, as you well know. I would have gladly renounced the post of Prime Minister and I would have withdrawn from public life, if it would not have been for you. I only stayed as Prime Minister because you needed me, especially when you prevented Peel from becoming Prime Minister and replacing me. I do not care about social life either. I would gladly give up the salons of the high society, and if all the high-ranking people would withdraw salutation to me, it would not hurt at all. If you had been a maid, I would have betrothed you, and I would will spent the last years of my life with you in Brocket Hall, away from the rest of the world, just you and me, and perhaps our children, Lord Melbourne explained, daydreaming. Our children? Victoria asked in astonishment. Well, yes, why are you surprised, ma'am? Maybe. I'm not that old, you know, still I can perfectly beget children, said Lord Melbourne half seriously and half jokingly, on the defensive and a little hurt in his pride. Oh no. I did not want to question your. What I mean, is that it's the first time you mentioned to have children with me, even in fantasies, said Victoria and blushed. Lord Melbourne, raptured and tormented at the same time, saw her. God, why she had to be so beautiful. Especially now that she blushed, imagining being mother of Lord Melbourne's children, and surely thinking about what had to happen between them so that these children were born. And the worst thing is that he had fantasized about begetting many children with her, recreating himself in the details of the act of begetting. And would we have many children? Victoria asked as if she were a mischievous and daring little girl. Victoria! He exclaimed in despair. I'm sorry, Lord M., but you brought it up, and I. She apologized. I would like to have many children with you, ma'am. Many. For me it would be a great pleasure, the greatest in the world, Lord Melbourne allowed himself to say manly and with a lascivious look barely disguised. Victoria blushed even more and felt a tingling and heat that ran down her body, and her hair bristled. With a nervous giggle she looked away, and felt like a teenage girl to whom an attractive man would have made a sexual innuendo for the first time in her life. Which was more or less what had happened. Lord Melbourne was embarrassed and repented almost immediately, and cursed himself for falling victim to the naive flirtation of a girl who could be his daughter and was inexperienced in the love affairs. Victoria, you must stop looking for excuses to be alone with me. This does not do you or me well. We must accept reality, and people must be muttering, Lord Melbourne chided her, trying to regain his sanity. In short, if it were not for I am the Queen we would already be married, Victoria said, ignoring him. Victoria, did you hear what I said? Lord Melbourne protested a little exasperatedly. Yes, but do not worry, William, Victoria answered quietly, restraining her joy. Listen, I've made an important decision, a decision I needed to talk to you about and reinforce the certainties I have about your feelings. I beg you to listen to me calmly and patiently, and you do not be overly alarmed or angry with me, and trust me, added Victoria, solemn and somewhat nervous. Victoria, you're scaring me. What are you thinking to do? Lord Melbourne asked, looking suspiciously and with concern. Lord M. I have decided that you and I should marry here, on your convalescent bed, without waiting for your recovery. Lord Melbourne needed a moment to assimilate what Victoria had said and then he smiled, thinking it was a joke, but when he saw the seriousness on Victoria's face the smile froze in a rictus of horror and scandal. Victoria, cannot you be serious? Tell me you're not serious! He exclaimed in despair and alarm. As far as I know, when a couple is going to marry and one of the members of the couple is in bed sick or injured, in danger of death, the marriage can be celebrated extraordinarily on the convalescent's bed, replied serenely and with security Victoria. Victoria, that's for ordinary people. By God, you are the Queen! Exclaimed Lord Melbourne, restlessly, stirring on the bed to try to get up himself something more, but a gesture of pain crept into his face and he had to desist. Lord M. Be still. You're going to open your wounds. Don't be reckless, my angel. Victoria said worriedly, putting her hands on his shoulders. Victory, it's nonsense. As a reigning monarch, in order to be married you must announce your commitment to the Privy Council, and listen to the Council's opinion. The Parliament must discuss the arrangements of your marriage, as the assignment of your future husband and to decide what title he will have. You need to comply with all the constitutional procedures and in practice have the consent of the nation through the institutions that represent it. You cannot just do what you want. Lord Melbourne said anxiously and disgustedly. I know, Lord M., but this is a special case. You are in bed and your health still hangs by a thread. For my misfortune, what I propose is a marriage of urgency, and, moreover, in secret, at least at first, she answered calmly and patiently. This has gone very far. And it is my fault, I must have imposed my maturity and sanity. Complained Lord Melbourne. Lord M., I will not tolerate you treat me like a little girl. Not after you have confessed your love to me and you have shown me that you want me as a man desires a woman. Victoria exclaimed angrily. Lord Melbourne stared at her, almost speechless, and in spite of himself, he recognized that seeing her like this, angry, made her look more desirable and that he wanted to lure her into his arms and satisfy his desires. He understood that once the genie had left the bottle, it was impossible to put it back inside. The cards between them were on the table and both had to act accordingly. My beloved Victoria, you do not understand that my devotion to you is the one that speaks, that I mortify myself for you, he said, stroking her cheek with the back of his hand. I know, Lord M., my love. Victoria answered by taking his hand and kissing, but I make my decisions and I will not turn back on this one. But Victoria, he would reply. Listen, William, there are two options. One is that, at this moment, if it is possible tomorrow, I summon the Privy Council and notify of my desire to marry you. Victoria said and raised her hand with a gesture to silence Lord Melbourne, who had opened his mouth to say something, and if there is strong resistance, let them understand clearly that if I am not allowed to marry you I am willing to abdicate. Victoria, you cannot put it like this, like an ultimatum. Your enemies would take advantage of that to force your abdication. Exclaimed Lord Melbourne, angry and nervous. That's why the other choice. I will marry you now, secretly, knowing a small circle of people of trust, if we do and then. Victoria had trouble saying the following, especially in the presence of Lord Melbourne, and a lump in her throat. You would die, I would be your widow in secret, and the public would not have to know, she said in a broken voice. I see. Lord Melbourne replied with a sad smile, in that case there would be no problem, you could even marry again. I would never! Victoria exclaimed in pain. And if I survive, Victoria? What would happen then? He asked. In that case, I would be the happiest woman in the world, and I have plans on how to persuade them accept that we celebrate a new marriage, this time public and official, and if they did not, then we would have to remain married in secret, and for practical purposes, you would be to me as the Earl of Leicester was to Queen Elizabeth, my intimate companion, but unlike them we would be married, although almost everyone would ignore the existence of that marriage and they think that I remain as the Virgin Queen, Victoria explained, concluding with a sad and complicit smile, matched by Lord Melbourne, as they both remembered their conversation at the costume ball where they were again seen after he rejected her proposal at Brocket Hall, and they used the example of Elizabeth and Leicester to exemplify their own feelings. You've thought of everything, ma'am, but it's reckless, a madness anyway, Lord Melbourne replied calmly. But it's a risk I'm willing to take. What you have to be clear, Lord M, is that I will go forward with your consent or without it, she answered very firmly. Will you marry me without my consent? Asked Lord Melbourne with some irony, but especially with fear and anguish. I told you, William, if you refuse to accept my proposal of marriage in secret, I will raise my request I marry you in public by threatening to abdicate. In that case it will be worse, Victoria insisted stubbornly. And what I told you when I explained you the reasons why I rejected your proposal at Brocket Hall. And your destiny? And our country? Melbourne asked. Do not question my love for this country, nor my sense of responsibility, Lord M. I believe that I will only be a good queen if I decide to whom I want by my side for to reign, and I resist the pressures of those who want to impose me a marriage to manipulate me for the benefit of their interests, especially my mother and my uncle Leopoldo. And if you love me, and if you really have faith in me, if you do indeed see greatness in me, I demand that you trust me. This time I will not admit a no for an answer, as in Brocket Hall. One way or another, I will fight to have you by my side, with your consent or without it, although I prefer that it be with your support, of course, Victoria answered with a regal look, that did not admit discussion. There is no way to dissuade you, is it? Lord Melbourne asked, very tired. No, there is no way, my beloved Lord M, she replied. Then, I suppose I can only say that I am at your command, my ma'am. I will do as you wish, and may God forgive me, he said, surrendering. I've never seen so much enthusiasm in a fiancé who is getting married. Said Victoria, ironic and mocking. Do you swear on your honor? Are you afraid I'll escape before I reach the altar, ma'am? Lord Melbourne said sarcastically, but in a certain reproachful tone. No, but I'm afraid someone will talk to you and dissuade you, someone like Baroness Lazen, she answered seriously. I swear by my son's grave. I'll do whatever you want, Victoria, Lord Melbourne promised. I thank you, my love. My sweet Lord M. Victoria said, and then leaned down to give him a soft kiss on the lips. In this way Victoria convinced Lord Melbourne, and then spoke to her inner circle, trusting them was not a mistake. Lord Alfred got an Anglican cleric, something older, an old friend of his family. It was not easy to convince him to celebrate the wedding. Lord Alfred and Victoria herself had to use all their power of conviction to do so. Victoria made promises to use her royal prerogatives to favour him in some way, to reward him for his service. In the end the man accepted, and the day and the hour were arranged. The moment they met in the guest bedroom where Lord Melbourne, the clergyman, Lord Alfred, Emma Portman, the Duchess of Sutherland, Lazen, and of course Victoria were staying. Scarrett was in charge of distracting the nurse on duty outside the bedroom. The cleric officiated the ceremony as quickly as possible, as much as the rituals of the Church of England allowed him. After asking the decisive question to Lord Melbourne, who answered in the affirmative, the clergyman asked the question to Victoria. Victoria, wilt thou have this man to thy wedded husband, to live together after God's ordinance, in the holy state matrimony? Wilt thou have obey and serve him? recited the clergyman in the crucial moment. I will. Victoria answered at the end of the cleric's ritual question, her voice steady and clear. I pronounce that they be man and wife together. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Victoria leaned over and kissed Lord Melbourne's lips, sealing their bond. Emma and the Duchess were crying. Lord Alfred seemed pleased by his friend, but at the same time nervous about the situation, and Laizen made an effort not to cry, her face disengaged. Somewhat later, at dawn, Victoria was leaving her bedroom with Scarrat. The Queen was dressed in her nightclothes and also a robe over her. Laizen came quickly. Majesty, but, where are you go? Laizen asked in dismay. I'm going to Lord Melbourne's bedroom, it's my wedding night, remember? Victoria said with a blush on her cheeks. Your Majesty! Are you going to spend the night with Lord Melbourne? Laizen said scandalized. I'm going to spend my wedding night with my husband. My husband, Laizen. Do not forget, Victoria replied in a tone of annoyance. But Majesty, is not prudent, you. Protested Laizen, horrified by the consequences. Laizen. I'm not going to discuss this with you. I want to spend my wedding night with my husband. Even if it is a special marriage, it is still a marriage. If you worry that the marriage is consumed, I do not think Lord Melbourne is in a position to do it yet, but if I could, is not it normal? In any case, it is your right, and it is my right. And if the worst happens, and Lord Melbourne does not survive his current condition, I want to have a beautiful memory of this day. There is nothing more to talk about, concluded Victoria decidedly. Thanks to Lord Alfred and Scarrat, arrangements had been made, and Victoria was able to stealthily slip in and into Lord Melbourne's bedroom. He was asleep, but he woke up when he heard noises and saw that Victoria was lighting a lamp. And then he could see as she took off the robe she wore on top of her nightgown. Victoria! But, what do I? Asked Lord Melbourne, astonished and alarmed. It's our wedding night. I came to spend the night with my husband, Victoria replied, her face flushed and a nervous smile, the gesture of a frightened and anxious little girl. Lord Melbourne glimpsed Victoria's beautiful body, that was divined under the semi-transparent nightgown, for under the garment she had nothing else. Lord Melbourne could almost admire Victoria's breasts and other parts of her body that he never thought he would ever see in real life, which he was never supposed to see. Lord Melbourne felt his heart pounding and the excitement taking over his body, and as he could not help it, the inevitable physical response occurred next. Lord Melbourne cursed to himself and thought, my God, Victoria, you are driving me crazy. Have mercy on me.